Hello friends, today I want to share with you 5 great books under 200 pages. Each of these guaranteed to entertain and also pack an emotional punch that you would normally expect within so few pages. And the other condition I had with the 5 books I selected is that none of them contain wasted breath. Every character, every action, every chapter carries weight and propels the story forward. So, without further ado, let's get to these 5 great books. The first book is A Man Survives by Vladimir Maximov, which, first off, how cool is this cover? But second off, you might have a little bit of trouble trying to find this book just because it's not regularly in print, but I highly recommend you do. This is a dark, heavy, and quite sensational tale of a runaway Soviet criminal who finds himself in the beginning of the story on a medical bed, potentially getting his legs amputated. And throughout the story, you're flipping back and forth chapter after chapter, going from current day where he's in this medical state. He's just come back to consciousness. He just regained consciousness and is trying to recollect what led him to this state. And then in the other chapters, the alternating chapters, you are slowly working your way through his life to this moment where he is running away from his family. He is becoming a smuggler. He is getting arrested and being sent to a Siberian prison. He's eventually escaping after the gruesome, harsh conditions that he had to withstand there. And then finds himself in the great wilderness of Siberia and forced to do some quite horrific things as well there. And it's a heavy tale. The narrative, or the narrator, the main character, very much resembles this rebellious, spiteful, psychologically complex character like Dostoevsky's Underground Man. So if you liked Notes from Underground, I think you'd really like this story. It's a little bit hard to follow at times chronologically and also figure out who's speaking. But I'll tell you what, you can read this story in 1 to 2 days. You can read it in a few hours. And I guarantee that halfway in, you'll find yourself as absorbed as I was within this chaotic psyche of the main character and question how he's able to stay so resilient and so stubborn and withstand this gruesome existence, yet at the same time be fully capable and willing to die. Fully, at times, wanting to just have that release, to give in to death, and yet not being granted that final ending, not being granted that relief. And it really ties to the title of the book, Жить человек, Man Lives, or as it's translated as well, Man Survives. The second book is The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. And this book takes you into the dystopian world of George Orr, who is having specific dreams that alter reality. And he goes to have the psychological evaluation done, and this doctor has this new machine he's created that is able to kind of control and curate certain dreams. So he promises George that they're going to be able to control these dreams, and hopefully George wants him to eliminate these kinds of dreams he's having that alter reality, because what happens is he'll have a dream that his aunt has passed away, and once he wakes up, his aunt that was living just the day ago is now passed away. No one remembers that she was living just yesterday. Everyone suspects that she's always been dead. And so these dreams are literally changing reality, changing history. And the doctor gets the idea that, well, if only they can manipulate these dreams to change reality for the better of mankind, for the better of humanity, then it'll create this greater outcome. He can use these dreams for good. And this concept is so fascinating because although, just like any sci-fi book, there has to be certain exceptions to where the doctor himself and 1 or 2 other characters in the book have to be aware of the before and after of reality, or at least a little bit aware of what's going on. The certain setting of the doctor's office never changes, no matter how the fabric of reality itself changes. The doctor's office with the machine for dreams is always there. With those exceptions aside that kind of have to exist to let the story flow and develop, this concept is so interesting because Le Guin uses it as an opportunity to explore the question of, can we create this utopian society? Can we take utilitarianism to its final conclusion, and what does that look like? Or the question it raised most for me was, Is this idea of peace or equilibrium within the world achievable? Or by solving one problem, does it beget another problem? Is there never this opportunity to find absolute peace? Can we not solve all these problems? For example, to solve the problem of overpopulation and poverty in the world, or dreams of a world that doesn't have this problem. And he wakes up to find that the vast majority of the population on Earth has disappeared, has never existed. And through these examples, Le Guin paints a picture of the moral obligation and the moral risks that come with trying to reshape the world or rewrite existence in that way. And I think it's all tied in well with the title of the book, which comes from the different Chinese philosophical quotes she puts at the beginning of each chapter, namely this one right here that says, quote, "To let understanding stop at what cannot be understood is a high attainment. Those who cannot do it will be destroyed on the lathe of heaven." So if you get the chance, I'd highly recommend this book for the concept alone, but the story is entertaining and fascinating as well. The third book is The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima. And this book is incredibly well written, and the story depicts the ideological battle between idealism and realism or rationalism. The story primarily follows two different narratives or perspectives. You have this young 13-year-old Japanese boy, Noboru, and his mother, who's a widow, and the other main narrative you follow is Ryuji, who is this sailor who has fallen in love with Noboru's mother and comes in the picture and is originally very much a role model to Noboru. He's this sailor, he's adventurous, he has these ideas of glory and that he's meant for something greater. He kind of depicts this hero for Noboru. And for Noboru and his gang of friends, he is a hero. He is something to look up to, something to aspire to. He is very different or in opposition to what they view as adult life, which is this kind of resignation to realism, resignation to the monotony of life, or a very Philistine way of living that doesn't believe in heroes and myths anymore, doesn't believe in the impossible, and just kind of surrenders to life, basically. And that's the beginning of the story, is you have this part one and part two, you have summer and winter. And once Ryuji goes on this trip, or he goes sailing again, he comes back in the wintertime around New Year's and no longer wants to live the life of a sailor. He wants to settle down. He's kind of given up this hope that glory is waiting on the other side for him. He doesn't want the chaos and the adventure that comes with sailing anymore. He wants family life. He wants to marry Noboru's mother. He wants to be this father to Noboru. And this isn't an easy decision for him to give up this idea of glory, this idealism that Ryuji once had when he was younger. He says, quote, "Are you really going to give it up? The feeling of the sea, the dark, drunken feeling that unearthly rolling always brings. The thrill of saying goodbye, the sweet tears you weep for your song. Are you going to give up the life which has detached you from the world, kept you remote, impelled you towards the pinnacle of manliness?" It very much reminds me of The Birth of Tragedy for Nietzsche, where you have this Dionysian way of living that is emotional and emphatic and almost rebellious in this way and full of energy and enthusiasm. And then on the other side, you have the Apollonian, that's order, that's kind of accepting reality for what it is. It's resigning yourself to existence and taking things for what they are. It's a bit of complacency. And this is a hard decision for Ryuji. But he does it. He resigns himself to it. And Noboru looks at him as a traitor. He looks at him with contempt, with disgust. And you see, I won't spoil the ending, but this leads to a whole, cascading effect where Noboru and the gang have to have some response to this, because Noboru's been humiliated by Ryuji. He's let him down. And I honestly felt really emotional reading this book, not for the reasons of the violence that happens in it, but primarily because the idea of letting down a child, or letting down your son or your daughter or someone that looks up to you, it was really a little bit more difficult than I'd expect you to read it. This idea of just how the disappointment, basically, the disappointment of some younger figure, whether it is a child or someone that looks up to you, and feeling like you've failed them, like you've given up, and that your existence is, in a way, this rejection or humiliation. But such a wonderful read. Mishima writes with such a poetic, visually compelling style. The linguistic devices he uses, the descriptive metaphors and analogies are so creative and so vivacious that it's really a joy to read. It's a beautiful read. It's a beautiful book. Not the easiest story to read, but a very riveting and emotional one. Nevertheless, the fourth book is slightly over 200 pages, but we're gonna fit it in anyway. Is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is a bit of autofiction, which at the time of reading it, I didn't realize how autobiographical it was. But then upon listening to a podcast, doing a bit more research, I realized it is almost 1-to-1 ratio with a little bit of a name swap throughout the book with different characters. But this story follows the life of Esther Greenwood and really depicts the struggle for women in the 50s and 60s, post-World War II, where they feel constrained and empty in the role of a housewife, where they are pretty much a servant to their husband. They have to subvert any of their desires, their career goals, their aspirations to the husband. And you really start to sympathize and empathize in a way through this book. Not that you couldn't understand that anyway or already, and especially in this world that has been much more liberated decades since, but to step inside the mind of Esther Greenwood, or in many ways Sylvia Plath, those lived experiences and perspectives become much more palpable. You understand the isolation and the frustration with societal expectations for women. You start to see the hypocrisy and the double standards that exist in these overlapping areas of behavior for men and women. And overall, the book is a bit of an emotional roller coaster. It's full of kind of charm and poetic prose that you would expect from such a prolific poet like Plath. And it's just a powerful read, and it doesn't take long at all. And the last book is Mumu by Ivan Turgenev. This book is such a gut-wrenching tale. I had it recommended to me by a number of Russian natives. As I'm learning the language, I was asking, what Russian literature do you recommend? And I had a few people recommend this story. I don't know if it's in print here in America that often, or it's probably in certain collections from Turgenev, but wow, this story just had me almost in tears. My eyes are watery, but a tear did not leave my eye. But this story follows a monstrous-sized deaf peasant named Gerasim, who works for this shrewish, lonely, and miserable older woman who essentially takes the few pleasures Gerasim has in this life and just whisks them away. He falls in love with this one woman on the property, and she gets done away with, essentially. And then we find this such a sweet, beautiful dog. Gerasim finds this sweet little dog, and because he's a mute, all he can make out is Mumu. And so the dog is named Mumu, and I won't spoil the ending. It is heartbreaking. Dog owners, be warned. But such a powerful tale for such a short, depending on what you get, it's probably 60 or so pages. It is such a powerful tale about the constraints and the restriction that peasants have at this time, and Gerasim's deafness and inability to speak really symbolizes the inability for the serf to speak up for himself, to have any kind of will or control over his life. He has to give up the things that he loves, the few parts of his life that he can hold on to or love. He has to give up to nobility or the landowner, whoever owns him. So it's a very powerful tale. It's very, although it's contextual historically, you need to have that context of the feudal system within Russia at the time. in a ways it still retains this timeless feel to it. So I'd highly recommend you read Mumu by Turgenev. So those are the 5 great books under 200 pages. If there's any books that I left out that you think are phenomenal, especially for that abbreviated length, let me know in the comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next video.